Yeah. We've been accused of knowing this is going to happen all the time because of all the Merklinger talk this spring. He's had a great spring, man. He really has. I mean, Brent's written about him. We talked about the mechanics. Just being out there and seeing him with our eyes, we can tell that he's improved. I mean, you can't really take anything from the orange and white game. That was nothing but a glorified practice the other day. If it is Jake Merklinger, and I mean, obviously he's QB1 on the roster right now. He's the most experienced, albeit hardly any. What has he done that's put himself in position to find success? What would this Tennessee team look like next year with Jake Merklinger QB1?
I just think he's continued to develop. I mean, they kind of tore him down and built him back up mechanically last year, kind of where George is at right now, right? I mean, George flashes, but then George will have those moments just because he's working on hand placement and how you hold the football and footwork and all those things that quarterback coaches love to tweak when a kid's coming from high school to college. And so for Jake, I mean, he's just a year further in. It's like making swing changes in golf. Like at first you're going to struggle a little bit. A year in, all of a sudden things start to click. And I think it started to click for him this spring. And he had a really nice spring. I said it on the board the other day. I've said it on the radio a couple of times. I've had multiple people that attend to practice, whether it be former players, high school coaches that said, man, Nico's good, but like Jake Merklinger it looks really, really good, just as good as Nico. And those people were saying that before any of this happened, right? So, I mean, like, that's not saying that he was going to beat out Nico. I don't think that was going to be the case. I think Nico was set up to have a really good year. I'm just saying that Tennessee felt really good about, like, okay, if what happened against Mississippi State last year happened again against anybody else, we'd feel really comfortable with the steps Jake has made going into the football game and not missing a beat.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is there's 11 other games outside of Mississippi State. So, like, if this was the thing, Brent, what gives you what are the and we might not know yet because we haven't seen him play. I mean, I get that. What are the strengths of a Jake Merklinger?
Well, I mean, listen, I think it's going to be a competition between the two of them. I'm not ready to cast George into he's shelved for a year as a red shirt. He would have redshirted, but now where do both of these guys go from today? I think where does this team go from this weekend? Look, it was easy. A bunch of guys were pissed off on Friday. Okay, they were still mad on Saturday. It was very evident Miles Kitselman was hot and still hot. The question now is when you get a few days and weeks removed from that and it settles into the reality, who puts in the work that needs to be done to get a guy ready? Okay, for a guy to get himself ready. I mean, Joey Halsley has got to work overtime and just guys hanging out in his office, these quarterbacks hanging out in his office, figuring out what they can do. George has got to eat more protein shakes and more peanut butter than he's ever had in his life because if he's going to compete, he needs another 15 to 20 pounds to protect himself in there.
Yep.
I think Merklinger is processing it pretty well, okay, and I think he's making decisions. I don't put a whole lot of stock in anything we saw on Saturday because that's so vanilla. But, yeah, I mean, I think there's some promise there, but I don't think this is he was as good as Nico was in spring. And I know, Austin, you're not saying this. He was as good, so they're not going to miss a beat. I think that's foolish. I think that's unrealistic here. I think the question is how much do you adapt offensively, what you can do? What do you tailor it around these guys if it's going to be these two? You add in another person in the mix. We'll see. I mean, this is going to be a very different summer for Joey Halsley and Josh Heupel than they thought it was going to be 5 days ago, Grant. I mean, we're in quarterback boot camp starting now until you get to fall camp in terms of in the office, film room, trying to get guys ready. It's going to feel a lot like year one for those guys when it was Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker trying to figure out and learn this offense.
Why do you say that? What do you think changed that makes it a busier summer for Joey? I mean, yeah, it does kind of have 2021 vibes in terms of just open competition, trying to figure this thing out. Everybody's going to be asking about it all through fall camp, and we're going to get a million different versions of the same answer. And it's going to be, I don't know. There's no off season quite like trying to figure out what's going on at quarterback off season.
That's right.
Well, and what are the trickle down effects of of Nico leaving. Does anybody else leave? Obviously, the guy we're looking at right here was rumored back in December to look around because the uncertainty with Nico. Well, Nico is no longer here. So I mean,
it's Mike Matthews, not Hunter Barnes.
Where's Mike Matthews at? Where's Brazel at? Where's Wendell Moy at? I don't know. I can't answer any of those questions. I did talk to some people close to Mike late in the week. When it was apparent he was not going to be back, and they said Mike and Nico are separate entities, so that's how you need to look at it. Like that, just because one leaves doesn't mean both are going to leave. So we'll see where all this goes. But I mean, you've got a window here that Josh Heupel and the leadership of this football team are going to have to be dotting I's and crossing T's, Brent, making sure everybody's good. Because, I mean, if they keep the core group here and they don't really lose very much, or at least don't lose any of the key guys, then Tennessee, with the right quarterback play, can still be very good.
Well, and I think the first thing you have to figure, if you're doing this in steps for me, and I could be completely wrong here, but one, you got to get with your current roster and figure out who's staying and make sure you're solid there and you're keeping intact and everybody's at the same place they were Saturday morning where they were all rallying together around one thing. Can you continue to keep that moving forward now that all these guys are, getting their own individual phone calls and their agents are calling going, hey, I can get you here if you want to move. I think I can get you here if you want to move, and all that kind of stuff. So that's one. Two then becomes, okay, we got to quickly decide and to figure out what is realistic and what's not realistic in the portal. Is there is a multi-million-dollar quarterback that's going to be available in the portal that we can go get, and that's where we're going to take this NIL money we have now from Nico not being here? Or are we going to go get a, quote, cheaper quarterback, a guy who doesn't cost you as much money, and take some of the rest of that money and we're going to put it in a receiver? You're going to put it in a position you might need if somebody else moves around. You're going to put more into, whatever to help this entire team, not just a quarterback position. The problem is you have to make those decisions pretty rapidly. This is not okay, we're going to take some time here and figure it out. This is, you got to be really revved up and understanding where you think things are going to be Wednesday when the portal opens. And then you've got to decide what you can do and go from there. Because here's what we know about the portal, right, AP? Like, you can't wait until, okay, it opens Wednesday. We'll start to look and see who's available come Friday after some guys get in. Because a lot of guys already know where they're going, or they have an idea of where they're going. You have got to be ready and hitting the ground running on Wednesday when this thing becomes official, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You've got to have a plan. You got to be ready to attack because this window's only open for so long, and you're kind of up against the clock here. Going back to, you mentioned wide receiver and a couple other positions. Spring is over. Do we know where Tennessee stands at some of those positions at wide receiver, defensive tackle, defensive back? I mean, Austin, I think it's self-explanatory if you can, and a lot of that depends on the quarterback, as Brent just pointed out. You add a wide receiver, a defensive tackle especially. What I want to know is about defensive backfield. How's Tennessee leave spring feeling about cornerback?
I don't think they're going to add anybody. I mean, maybe I'll be surprised, and by Thursday or Friday they've got a cornerback in here for a visit. But it just doesn't feel like they're going to add anybody at that spot. I think they're definitely adding a receiver. I think they're definitely adding an interior defensive lineman. But here's the other thing: what happens if somebody leaves that you're not expecting to leave? Then it obviously would pivot you at maybe a position or two, right? I mean.
Yep.
I think that will, let's say an offensive, let's say a guard left, let's say Wendell Moy, then I'm not sure that Tennessee adds an offensive lineman there because I think they feel really good about the spring Shamus had and Jesse Perry, and pick up and roll on and play with the guys you got. But if they lost a corner, if they lost a linebacker, I think all those are positions that you're more likely to have to go to the portal and pick somebody up if you lost somebody. And I mean, again, no one knows at this point if they're losing anybody.
Well, and so, I mean, the feeling, just stay on the offensive line. If you lost a tackle versus a guard, you might be in a total different position, right? If you felt like, hey, maybe we got to go. I mean, here's my one takeaway, because we had this discussion on the podcast, and Austin and I debated it a little bit. And Austin was like, they don't have a choice. They're taking a receiver. They got to take a receiver. And I'm like, well, that. Saturday, I was like, all right, Austin's 100% right. You got to take a receiver. They have to go find a receiver because here's Brazel not out there performing and going through anything. Here's Braylon Staley not out there going through. Like, you got to go get somebody. And I don't know who that's going to be, Grant, but they have, of all the positions, regardless of what happens with the quarterback, of all the positions out there that you need help at besides quarterback, number one outside the quarterback is the wide receiver position, based on what I saw on Saturday. Just by who was walking around in street clothes.
Can we shout out Rodarius Jackson for a minute? Was that Rodarius Jackson with the one-handed catch at the corner there?
Spring.
He had a really good day, it felt like, and nobody ever is going to remember it happening at all. I mean, it was a glorified practice, but I think he did have a good day, and nobody's ever going to talk about it again.
How many touchdowns?
Does anybody remember 10 plays from Saturday?
No.
I mean, everything was about. I mean, it was nothing. I mean, it was nobody's even going to. Other than one great one-handed catch, I don't think anybody else is going to talk a whole lot about anything they saw.
How many touchdowns will Jack Van Dorselaar have this fall?
He won't have 3 in a game.
He won't have 3.
He won't have 3 in a game this fall. I don't think.
Another point, and I know we're going to transition towards the end here and talk a little hoops portal, get an update there. And this is, you can't answer this now because there's still just an unknown. You don't know about who's going to be added to this room. I get all that, but AP, I heard you say this in the 2-minute drill after the Orange and White game, and I couldn't agree more. The people that vote on SEC preseason picks and all that, more like the media, like they're going to sit here and say, oh, you lost Dylan Sampson. Oh, you lost a wide receiver room. Oh, you lost Nico now. Psh, Tennessee 9th, Tennessee 8th or whatever. Like, I completely agree with that. I think Tennessee's going to be like middle of the pack, voted on the SEC. But over there at FanDuel, Tennessee went from 9.5 right now to 8.5. This is still a very good roster. I did a hit with somebody on Sunday, and they said, is Tennessee punting on this season? I mean, is this going to be a 6-win season? And it took everything in me not to just hysterically laugh. Like, I mean, what are you talking about? This roster is still pretty good. So how much does the one loss of your starting quarterback in Nico Iamaleava maybe change the win-loss, college football playoff expectations, all that conversation now, again, not knowing if you're, who you're going to add to that quarterback room?
Well, because a lot of those guys are looking at things from 1,000 feet, and they're not in the bubble, and they don't understand who's here and the young pieces and all those things. I mean, I think, there's just such an unknown, and there's even more of an unknown now. I mean, like there was unknown, and we've talked about that all spring, at wide receiver and corner and just certain spots that Tennessee's gonna have some nice young players, offensive line that have not yet done it, or at least not yet done it together, and so now there's an even bigger unknown, and so it's going to be interesting to kind of see how all this thing pieces together, because you're right. They're going to go in there and kind of fly under the radar, which isn't a bad thing. Like, they're going to be under the radar with a schedule that, is not like, I mean, it's got tough games on it, right? But they're all kind of separated. Syracuse now becomes a little bit more of a tighter game with a quarterback change in game 1 on a neutral site. You got your big 3 are all separated in each month. Georgia, September, Bama, October, Florida, November. Your road games are Starkville, who was terrible a year ago, and Kentucky, not a very good roster. And you have Oklahoma at home. So, again, the schedule is not overly difficult. And so there's still opportunity there if you can find the right quarterback to mesh with all these other pieces.
I think this is my biggest, once we get through the next week and a half here, who goes, who stays type deal. Okay, we get the I think it's 10 days as the portal length. Once you get that closed, I'm going to be really fascinated to see if this team, Grant, can carry the chip on their shoulder that they currently have. Very, very different circumstances. Okay. And so the 98 roster was really, really good. But there was a national narrative that Tennessee was going to take a real step back because Peyton Manning was gone. And Peyton Manning and Nico, I'm not comparing the two, but just follow me here for a second. There was a real narrative that Tennessee was, wow, they missed their window of opportunity to win because the best quarterback that's ever played is gone. that team channeled, and Austin, you've talked to a bunch of those guys. They didn't dislike Peyton, but they were ready to prove to themselves and to prove to everybody that the program was a lot more than a quarterback from New Orleans, Louisiana. And that was their motivating factor. Now, it was a longer motivation because it was January till the start of the season. Can this team rally and continue to hold this edge about them that they're going to prove to everybody that they're exactly what Josh Heupel said on Saturday, and that is they're built to win. They got enough parts to go win, Grant. Can they continue to collectively hold that edge in a world where it's more individualized in a team sport than it's ever been?
Can they do it when the adrenaline wears off? Can they still have that chip on their shoulder? I mean, you look at last year, and I'm not trying to trash Nico because he's on the way out, but Tennessee's defense was really, really good. Tennessee's defense was the biggest reason Tennessee was in the college football playoff. The run game, Dylan Sampson, how productive he was. I mean, they got shut out in the first half of 3 straight games early in the season. Like that, they had a lot of stuff to overcome offensively. So I think my question in terms of the expectations with and without Nico, between 24 and 25 is what's the defense look like, and how does the 25 defense compare to the 24 defense, and how does the run game compare in 25 without Sampson to 24 with Sampson? Like Josh's offenses have typically had really good run game production, regardless of who the running back is. If it's one guy, if it's 3 guys. So what do they look like in those areas? To me, is just a big of a question as what happens with quarterback now that Nico's gone. I
don't know what Grant and Eric heard, but all I heard was Tennessee's win the national title.
I heard that too.
That's basically what I heard from Hubs.
98 balls, handshake emoji, 25 balls.
It was like 98.
That was the point I was making, right, AP? I mean, that's exactly what I was trying to say.
I heard him say,
thanks.
Nico is Peyton Manning.
I appreciate y'all really listening and my diatribe there.
Who's Al Wilson? Howard T. Lander?
It was wild seeing those two on the same field the other day, let me tell you.
I tell you what, I asked Al, standing there talking to him, and we did a deal on the game broadcast, but I asked him about, and he said, the thing is, somebody on this team, a group of guys on this team, have to be willing to be uncomfortable. They got to be willing to be the guy that is going to make, they're going to stand on their own and hold everybody accountable when a group of people don't want to do what needs to be done. They want to cut a corner that day, or they want to blow something off, or not do something at full tilt. Who is going to be that guy? And I think that's the question. I think that was the question before Nico on offense, Austin. Who's going to be the guy that stands up and says, we're not cutting any corners today on anything we're doing. Dylan Sampson was there a year ago. Kitzelman wants to be there, but Kitzelman's not going to be out there doing those things. So who is going to be the guy that makes sure that everything that's being done this summer is at 100% the effort it needs to be at for this team to be at their best? I
still think it's Kitzelman. I think he's going to be there. I mean, if you were out at practice this spring, it was I couldn't really record tight ends because Kitzelman is like critiquing every rep like a coach, and he's positive. If it's warranted, it's the word shh and it ends in E. If it's bad, I think that's who he is. I think he's going to be out there. I think it has to be him. I think he's the alpha in the room offensively now. And unless one of these quarterbacks, steps up, because let's face it. Quarterbacks are looked to lead. That wasn't Nico's forte. That just wasn't his personality. He was trying to get there, but it's not his personality. I think it's got to be Kitzelman. I'm just not sure anybody else on offense can do it. Does Lance Hurd have it in him? Maybe Sam Pendleton, but he's still new to the room.
It's tough when you're new.
Yeah, to me, it's hard for a quarterback to have that with no games of experience or 2 mop-up games of experience. It's hard for that guy to become the alpha when he hasn't bled on the field, for lack of a better phrase, Grant. That's hard for that guy to be that. I'm not saying an Al Wilson leader, but to be a true alpha I think that's hard for these two young quarterbacks to be able to be this summer. I really do. I don't think that they're disrespected. I mean, I think their teammates have respect for them, but man, they don't have a lot of tread on that. They don't have a lot of wear on that tire for those words to maybe resonate the way it would, somebody who's played a good amount of football.
Yeah, and you got to be yourself. I mean, if you're forcing it, your teammates are going to see that, and it's going to be hard to follow. I think Kitzelman's a good place to start, and then you go from there.